Hey guys, welcome back. So now jumping back into Hell Arisen, to where at this point Lex Luthor has gotten the biggest surprise of his new lifetime, with the Batman Who Laughs sending the Secret Six to pay Luthor a little visit. And so let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch us spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so if you guys remember in our last talk about Hell Arisen, Luthor had just made his way back to Earth Zero because Perpetua had detected an abnormality that originated from the dark multiverse that was located here. And with sending Lex here, she tells Lex like this abnormality, it is of serious importance because it's the only thing threatening her restructuring the multiverse. And if in worst case an incursion was allowed between the dark multiverse and the light, then Perpetua would never be able to assume her final form. But as we know, when Lex got home, he arrived to a full house, with the Batman Who Laughs sending the Secret Six to already be here awaiting on Lex's arrival. And really it's everyone here except for Commissioner Gordon, of whom we'll talk about a little later. But also in this case with the Secret Five, if you will, with them being here, the Batman Who Laughs lets Lex in on a bit of information that he wasn't aware of prior to this point, which was pretty much to the notion that all this new power that he had gotten from Perpetua, with him being able to wield the 7 hidden forces, which is essentially him borrowing Perpetua's power, but even with him doing this, these powers are useless against energies from the dark multiverse, of which each of the infected have a dose of at the current time. So essentially with Lex having to fight the 5 of them off, he's not able to use any of this new power, but the infected, they're able to use all of theirs. And it's like, if you think about it, this really isn't like a new situation to Lex Luthor, as far as him being physically outmatched. And because of this, he lets them know that he's gonna fight them with his intellect, and more or less pretty much combat them with old school Lex Luthor. And speaking of old school Lex, if there's anybody that he's most ready for, it's a Kryptonian. And in addition to that, they're fighting Lex Luthor in his lab. And because of that, like when he gets the first opportunity to kind of duck out of their sights, he activates the synthetic red sun, taking the powers of Supergirl, so he's able to get her out of the way quickly. And this is like one of the things that made the most sense because after all, this is Lex Luthor. And I would be a little disappointed if he didn't have like a red sun Philips Hue preset already in his home kit. But for the other 4, he uses things that he already has and kind of just makes them work to fit who they may. Like in the case of Deathbringer, aka Donna Troy, who calls Luthor out and just tells him pretty much straight up like, okay, the lights was nice, but Luthor, you really can't fight. And Luthor really doesn't argue about it, like, okay. But as a solution, he sends out his Lex bots who have been programmed to fight like Lady Shiva, and with doing so, he essentially just points at her and just initiates Protocol World Star. Because who really needs to know how to fight when you bought a bunch of robots that can beat up people for you? And in the case of Scarab, aka Blue Beetle, Lex uses his tools which have been working with alien technology for as long as he's been facing Superman, and he uses it to incapacitate Scarab. And the way that Lex does it, it almost makes you feel like fighting against Superman is like Mac OS, but then in the case of Scarab, he's like Windows Millennium Edition. But essentially when Scarab tried to plug in and shut down Lex's system, Scarab was instead shanked with a USB killer, which then pulled him out of the fight. Which at this point brings us to Carter Hall from Earth 3. And as far as Carter Hall, like that wasn't even much of a fight either. And after Lex suited up, he hit him with a one-hitter quitter and that was it. But I'd have to say, like out of all these solutions, the one for Supergirl and the one for King Shazam, those two if anything were the most clever, because when we come around to King Shazam, Lex actually used the part of him that is now Martian to reach into King Shazam's mind and compel him to say Shazam, and after that he just gassed him. And I gotta say, like, I'm a little upset that Lex took them all down this easily, with this 5-way takedown comprised of all cheap shots. But even still, this is Lex Luthor, so it's like, what do you expect? But even still, and I feel like I'm kind of arguing with myself, but even still, I wanted them to get some shots in, some good ones. But at this point, I feel like that's something that's being saved more so by Tynion for the Batman Who Laughs. But in the case of Lex, as he's leaving, he's just uploading the information that he came for to his suit, and with doing so, programming this building to self-destruct. But just before he walks out, Supergirl kind of calls him on his mess, and really everything I just mentioned as far as him being all cheap shots, which once again is like classic Lex Luthor. But in this case where classic Lex Luthor got him out of this pinch, Supergirl more or less lets him know that he's in a bad situation either way. Because one, yeah, classic Lex Luthor got you out of this, but even with him still being in there, he's cursed with the ego of classic Lex Luthor. But even on the flip side of that, with everything he's done as far as taking on this new body and gaining powers from Perpetua, he may have become physically more powerful, but ultimately now he's less than what he was, to where at the most he's only a servant of Perpetua. And it's like, you know, Lex don't like that. And he may not just outright say it, but you know he doesn't like it. But after that, Lex dips out and he sends the building down on all of them. And I can't help but hope that Billy talks in his sleep and he said Shazam, because if he didn't, his dirt nap's gonna be a bit longer than the rest of them. But from here, jumping over to the Batman Who Laughs, who we had seen briefly pop up on Lex's monitors, at this point in time we catch up with him making preparations for the next steps in his plan. And essentially we find out that his whole setup with the Secret Six attacking Lex Luthor, like that wasn't meant to stop Lex by any means, which we more or less know, because in the end the Batman Who Laughs, like he's the one who's supposed to deliver that punchline. You know what I mean? Like he's the one who's supposed to stop the apex predator, Lex Luthor. But at this time where we pick up with the Batman Who Laughs, who's in like this small cabin in the middle of Slaughter Swamp, we find out that he has another special guest who he's saving for a very particular moment. And also what we find out is, like, in the time being, everything that the Batman Who Laughs is sending Lex's way, that he's really just doing it to buy himself time, so that Lex doesn't find out what he's accomplished just yet. But with this individual who the Batman Who Laughs has taken as prisoner, he lets the Batman Who Laughs know that he's faced demons like him before for eons. And it's here where we get another nugget from like the Batman Who Laughs past, of which I would love to get like a dedicated series like showing us all this stuff, because Dark Knight's Metal and the Batman Who Laughs miniseries, they skipped a lot of stuff. Like when we find out here that back on the Batman Who Laughs old world, they sent the Spectre on him and the Batman Who Laughs killed him, which really just raises all kind of questions in my mind. But nonetheless, it really just adds to all the things that we could get to know more about at a later date. But when we finally get to see who it is that the Batman Who Laughs has taken prisoner, we come to find out that it's Phantom Stranger, which now makes it secret prisoner number 2, with first Rip Hunter and now Phantom Stranger. But in the case of Phantom Stranger, just to go over a little bit of his background, and like, okay, first of all, this guy got a lot of origins. Like his background got different backgrounds. But essentially when he first appeared in Phantom Stranger number 1 back in 1952, but at the time his character was someone who was surrounded with much mystery, because he would pop up and save people from these supernatural events, and then not long after just disappear into the void. And really, like in the beginning, that mysterious aspect was like the biggest thing about him. Like, who was he really? Where did he come from? And from the perspective of those who encountered him, there was like this question of like, is he a man or is he a ghost? But later on towards the late 80s, in Secret Origins Volume 2, like this is where the different imaginings of his background started to roll in, to where after then there was a lot of different origins. But they essentially stem from him either being a fallen angel who didn't side with either heaven or hell, and because of that he was cursed to walk the earth for all time. And then you have others that said he was like Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, and after ending himself, he didn't go to heaven or hell, but he appeared before the Council of Wizards, who had then placed 30 pieces of silver around his neck as a reminder for what he had done. And there's a ton of others that stem from him either being a messenger of God that didn't want to follow his orders, so then he was cursed to walk the earth, neither as man or messenger. And then there's one where he's just a scientist. And to be completely honest with you here, I don't know which one we're getting, but I do know that more recently that his powers have been more associated towards magic, which is more the consistent factor because he's always been vulnerable to magic. But with him being held here by the Batman Who Laughs, like, I couldn't tell you what kind of plans he has for this guy. And I mean, like, aside from Phantom Stranger being a storyteller, and the Batman Who Laughs wanting the Phantom Stranger to tell Lex how biblical his ending is gonna be. And like, that's my best guess at this point. But really, we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. But after this, we head back over to Metropolis, to where we find out that Lex Luthor has taken over the apartment of Mercy Graves, of which he has had hidden resources here for a time such as this. And even though previously Mercy used to work for Lex Luthor, like none of this was ever in any previous contract, but rather this was just Lex using the people who were close to him as a means for him to have a place to go if he ever needed to regroup, which is exactly the situation he's in right now. But while he's here, he catches her up on a bit of what's going on, and for part of his next move, he's going to definitely need her help, because for one, there's still a bit that Lex Luthor needs to learn about the dark multiverse. And as far as getting that information from the Secret Six, 5 of them he can't necessarily get it from, and mainly because a majority of them he considers to be contaminated. And like, while he's breaking this down, he switches his form to appear like his former self, because essentially this whole time he's running at the mouth, Mercy's just losing it because there's an alien in her living room. But as far as what he means with a few of the members of the infected being contaminated, he mentions that he needs a blood sample from a member of the Secret Secret Six in order to reverse whatever the Batman Who Laughs has put in motion. But because both Donna and Billy have magic running through their veins, he can't use their blood. And Supergirl, count her out because she got stabbed with kryptonite. And aside from them, he could have gotten a sample from either Blue Beetle or Hawkman, but rather than trying to get lucky twice with a secret 5 out of 6, he figures that it would make more sense to just go for the one that's singled out, who of course would be Commissioner Gordon. And while Lex goes after him, he sends Mercy to get a specific ally who Lex needs possibly more than he can imagine. And so from here we go over to the Hall of Justice, to where we see Lex Luthor more or less shapeshifting his way through to make his way to find where Commissioner Gordon is being held. And for the most part, he's just walked his way right through there, and mainly because, like we'd seen in earlier issues of Justice League towards the beginning of DC Rebirth, the Hall of Justice was made open to the public, so for that reason anybody could just walk in, which is exactly what Lex did initially. But when it came down to the more restricted areas, at that point he kind of just had to work with what he had. But when Lex gets here and he finally finds Commissioner Gordon, who at this point looks bad, like he looks like Commissioner Gordon off the Harley Quinn cartoon. Like you can tell this guy's seen better days, and really like right now Gordon just looks like if he were to be cut, he would just bleed out wet cigarettes and loneliness. But really, when Lex comes here to take the sample of Gordon's blood, he tells Gordon like he's not here for the small talk, and really from Lex's perspective, like all of these people, like the Batman Who Laughs has really gotten into their heads, and for that reason he doesn't really care to converse with any of them. But he does mention that he wants to get Gordon's blood so he can also further investigate how badly this infection is spread, and much to his surprise, like Gordon has been spreading it to everyone who has been going in to check on him while he was being held in the Hall of Justice, which was really just another Trojan horse plan from the Batman Who Laughs, who once again tricked the heroes into bringing the weapon home. But at this moment, in the case of Mercy, who has went out to Gotham City to pursue this special ally, we then find out that Lex Luthor sent her to go get the Joker in order to help him out. And it's crazy because for the Joker, this is a huge I told you so moment. And like the whole time that she's here asking, like the Joker's just soaking it up. But this is a huge moment for him. And I can just imagine, like, ever since he turned on the Legion of Doom and he quit, like just after he found out that Lex Luthor was working with the Batman Who Laughs at the time. But I can just imagine, like, ever since then, like even though the Joker has wanted to steer clear from the Batman Who Laughs, that eventually the Joker knew that Lex was gonna reach out to him for help. Like it really wasn't but a matter of time. And so now, like, what the Joker decides to do from here, I think is gonna be very interesting, because personally I think he's gonna want a front row seat. And so now real quick, just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons, and a special thanks to all of you for your support, and shout out to Damani, who's joined the Patreon squad just recently. Thanks for tagging in with the squad. And for anyone else who wants information on how to join, just check out patreon.com/DopeSpill. But aside from that, let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments, because right now we're like halfway through Hell Arisen, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on how you feel like the Phantom Stranger and the Joker will play their parts in the calamity that's to come. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.